It is now clear that we've achieved the most incredible political thing. Look what happened. Is this crazy? This will truly be the golden age of America. That's what we have to have.
He's moving back in. Get used to it. At the end of January, after the inauguration, they've already erected the podium for the dignitaries. After the 2016 election, he was seen here in DC as an aberration. After January the 6th, 2021, his opponents imagined him in a rectangular cell, not an Oval Office. Now the voters of this nation have given Trump another chance. Latest figures put Mr. Trump on 292 electoral college votes, well over the 270 he needed to win the White House. Kamala Harris is on 224. Unlike 2016, Mr. Trump is winning the popular vote as well, with 51% compared to Harris's 47.5%, although that is likely to narrow. The president-elect took vast swathes of the country, including many of the key swing states. The Republicans are also eyeing a sweeping victory in Congress. They won the Senate, retaking control for the first time in 8 years, with 52 seats. The US House of Representatives is yet to be called, but the Republicans are ahead, edging towards that 218-seat majority that they need. And in the last few minutes, reports say that Kamala Harris has conceded to Mr. Trump on the phone, congratulating him on his victory. Our Washington correspondent, Siobhan Kennedy, has the story of the night and the morning after.
Please welcome President-elect Donald J. Trump.
As political comebacks go, Donald Trump's overnight election win in America is nothing short of spectacular.
I want to thank the American people for the extraordinary honor of being elected your 47th president and your 45th president.
The polls had him neck and neck with Kamala Harris, but as in the past two elections, they had vastly underestimated the strength of his support.
Frankly, this was, I believe, the greatest political movement of all time. There's never been anything like this in this country and maybe beyond. Look what happened. Is this crazy?
NBC News projects Donald Trump will take the state of Ohio.
In the end, Trump looks set to win a clean sweep of the critical swing states.
That Donald Trump will become the 47th president of the United States.
He also made significant gains, turning rural America redder still and growing support in cities and suburbs, both traditional Democratic strongholds. And to cap it all, Trump looks set to take the popular vote too, a prize he particularly coveted, having been denied it in 2016.
Winning the popular vote was very nice, I will tell you. It's a great feeling of love.
The popular vote for a man 4 times criminally indicted, twice impeached, and who spent the final days of his campaign giving a platform to racist slurs while threatening to persecute his opponents.
Thanks for coming out, ladies.
But in the end, none of it mattered. Instead, it was largely the economy that won it for Trump and his ability to lay the blame for people's pain at the Democrats' door.
And we will also rescue our economy, because our economy is in a mess.
And pretty much every demographic, white, young and female voters, all the groups that Harris had tried so hard to court, moved closer to Trump.
It reflects something that we've seen in the exit polls, this so-called shift of the bro vote in particular towards Donald Trump.
But it was his appeal to young men in particular that seemed to pay dividends. Harris did win among black men and women, though she failed to increase Joe Biden's margin. Many were gathered at her election party in Washington, D.C. last night. The mood at first joyful, like her campaign had been when she took the baton from a beleaguered Joe Biden in July and re-energized the party. But her focus on women's rights and painting Trump as a danger to democracy, a fascist in waiting, failed to pay off. As the map turned red, the gloom descended.
Well, it's about 12:15
The mood is pretty somber here. They put the music up to try and G people up, but it does not change the overall picture, and it's not looking good for Kamala Harris.
I'm saddened that I live in a country that would back a president that incited violence in this nation and has really disrupted the humanity that most of us believe in.
Why did America not vote for Kamala Harris?
Number one, she's the first woman. Secondly, she's a black woman. America is still, we're dealing with racial inequality. Well, we're a split country right now. And that's the sad thing about it. We need to unify.
Among the crowd, we meet Sonia, a university friend of Harris. She's your friend?
Yes.
What's your message to her?
I would just say, you did it all. You left nothing out there. You ran a brilliant campaign. Unfortunately, the country wasn't ready for you.
The stage was ready, but in the end, Harris failed to materialize, as did her dream to become America's first female president. Meanwhile, another stage was being constructed, ready for the next commander-in-chief. The same scaffolding Trump's supporters clambered over to attack the Capitol 4 years ago, an attack on democracy that no one believed he could return from. But against all the odds, Donald J. Trump is back, voted this time in a landslide as America's 47th president. Well, I am here at the scene of the misery of the night before. There's a steady trickle of people going into Howard University there beside me, waiting to hear Kamala Harris give her concession speech at her old university in a couple of hours' time. We're told that she has already today phoned Donald Trump to wish him congratulations on his victory and to emphasize the importance of the peaceful transfer of power. This, of course, is not the speech that she wanted to be giving here today. She wanted to be celebrating her historic victory as the first black and Asian woman to become the first president of the United States. Instead, she has spectacularly really failed in that endeavor. In the end, she didn't even win as many women as Joe Biden did 4 years ago. She also failed to attract as many Latinos despite a last-minute pitch to them. Of course, she'd made women the central issue of her campaign, the focus on women's rights and abortion. But in the end, it was Donald Trump's focus on the economy and people's pain in their pockets that has propelled him, not her, back to the White House.
So, how was this election won? Donald Trump has called the support that he built a realignment, going beyond his base into territory previously deemed out of bounds for a Republican candidate. Well, our data correspondent Kieran Jenkins looks at the voters who appear to have propelled him to victory.
Well, the story of the night is Trump gaining almost everywhere. He won only one swing state in 2020. This time it looks like he's won all 7. The 5 here, where nearly all votes have been counted, look at the swing, the shift from Democrat to Republican red, around 2 to 4 percentage points, enough to win these swing states comfortably. But the largest shifts overall in Trump's favor were actually in Democratic states, here in blue. States he didn't win, but speak to this broader change. These are 10% plus swings to Trump in Democratic blue states, New York and New Jersey, on course for the best Republican performance in New Jersey since 1988. And time and again, Trump gaining ground. You see it in the exit polls, although the numbers could change as experts get more data in the coming weeks. But what you see is, compared to 2020, Trump has increased his lead among rural voters, crucial these to winning the Midwestern swing states in particular from 2020 to 2024. Look at that Republican gain. Rural voters, always a big part of the Trump base, but now he's expanding beyond his traditional support. Look at Latino men. He was trailing behind Democrats with this group in 2020. Democrats way ahead then in blue. But now Trump has won a majority of this group in Republican red, 10 points more for Trump than Harris among Latino men. And Trump even cut into the Democrats' lead with women, which was 15 points last time. but is just 10 points that Democratic lead with women today. That's despite the Harris's campaign's focus on reproductive rights. Trump's done the same thing with young voters, slashing the Democratic lead down from 24 points in 2020 to just 13 points after a huge Republican campaign effort to target young men in particular. And if all this bears out as the data is finalized, it suggests a profound shift among US voters and no silver lining in sight for Democrats.
Now tonight we have an array of guests to explain what happened and what will happen next, including a former chief of staff for Trump when he was president, one of his foreign policy advisors, and a member of Donald Trump's family who didn't vote for him. But first, let's have a look at the last night's results. I'm joined by Neera Huck, who was a senior director in the Obama White House administration, and Whit Ayres, a Republican pollster. Welcome to you both on this wonderful day, certainly in terms of weather.
It is a beautiful sunny day, I will give you that.
Okay, let's talk about politics. Whit, first to you. What was the secret source of his victory?
American presidential elections tend to be referenda on the incumbent administration. And Kamala Harris was a key member of an administration whose job approval was mired at 40%. She was essentially running for a second Obama term, a second Biden term. Easy mistake. A second Biden term, especially given her inability to articulate a clearly different vision. And no American president or administration has been reelected with a 40% job approval.
Okay, so did Trump win it or did the Democrats lose it?
Well, both. I mean, I don't think that it's Kamala Harris's fault. I think that given her skill set and her experience level, she did a remarkably good job with the time she had available. This loss is on Joe Biden and his stubborn refusal to get out of the race in time for the Democrats to have a robust primary process where they could have nominated a stronger candidate who is not connected to this administration.
And that was going to be my question.
He sounds like a lefty American. This is where we end up meeting.
Yeah, but that was my question.
Moment.
Come on, let's hear it. What do you think? The desk blocker in chief in that building over there should have gone out ages ago.
The data is showing that this was not a moment for Harris, especially if Harris was going to continue to ally herself with her own president. It is such a difficult position that she had 100 days to come out from under, and it didn't work. I will say that the other headwinds are the fact that Donald Trump never conceded and never left public stage.
True, all true. But I don't want to gang up on you here with Whit, but the question really is, had Joe Biden opted out earlier, you would have had a proper primary race, she would have been tested, there might have been another candidate, and we will never know.
For context, though, right, for our viewers across the pond right now, this is a 2-year-long process here in the United States to find the next president. Had it been shorter, people's memories would also be in the moment, addressing ideas of the moment. So the primary season is insanely long in the United States. At the time, Joe Biden was the only person who had defeated Donald Trump. He aged in public view, and the system wasn't designed to do anything other than wait for him to step aside.
Whit, how is it possible that Donald Trump didn't just keep his coalition of voters together, but built on it when he was frankly insulting to so many different segments of the society?
People remember Donald Trump's pre-pandemic economy as far superior to the Biden-Harris economy. Prices were lower for food, prices were lower for gas, interest rates were a third of what they are now, and people remembered that favorably, particularly people who live paycheck to paycheck.
But we need to dig into who we're talking about, people, because within women voters, the white women overperformed for Trump more than ever before, going from the first 2016 election 52% to 69% for Donald Trump. Black women, however, consistently for Kamala Harris. So there is a disconnect here that does have racial undertones.
But we didn't expect that to be quite that way, did we? Because people thought that white women would also vote for reproductive rights, would vote against the kind of stuff that he was saying.
They did in swing states where abortion was on the ballot to make it a state protection, whether it was a blue seat in Maryland, swing state like Wisconsin. Those same women voted to protect their personal rights, did not vote for Harris.
In Britain and elsewhere, they're looking at America and tearing their hair out and saying, why on earth can this country not elect a woman? The second time round, defeated by the same guy.
it's not a matter of not electing a woman. It's a matter of not electing either one of these women. It's very possible that you could have a different female candidate who was more skilled and more experienced who could get elected, but not Hillary Clinton and not Kamala Harris.
The idea of more skill and experience in Hillary Clinton or Kamala Harris is kind of laughable given their pedigrees and the elections and what they've done. I will say that given Britain's experience as well, a female candidate from the Liberal Party is probably not destined for America anytime soon.
To be precise, maybe a more popular candidate than a more experienced
or a
one or
Republican
skilled.
woman.
We could go on for hours, but we don't have the time. Naira Haq-Whitehurst, thank you very much indeed. Now, let's hear from Cassie Smedley, a Republican strategist and former press secretary for the Republican National Committee. When I spoke to her earlier, I asked her what did she think was the secret to Trump's success.
Well, I think very specifically, you saw in how he opened up his closing message at those final rallies. Are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? It was clear, it was succinct, and it was trusting the American people to have a good memory. And over the course of these last 4 years, when the administration, day after day, the Biden administration would say, things are great, things are going better, you should be feeling good. People were saying, we're not, and we're trying to tell you that.
Let's talk about some of the things that he said he would do. What about tariffs, first of all? I think he said 20% tariffs on most imports, maybe 60% on Chinese imports. Do you think he'll go through with that?
Yeah, I think the tariff policy is going to be interesting to look at. Of course, the tariffs that he levied against China during his first term were so effective that the Biden administration maintained them. So there is an argument to be made for what happens when you put pressure on countries and industries that have been taking advantage of Americans and American jobs and the American economy.
But you're not worried about what many people fear might be, a trade war or growing protectionism, which would kill the global economy.
And I just think, again, we know what life looked like under the first Trump term when you had gas at less than $2 a gallon. You had mortgages that you could afford. You had access to goods. I mean, they had such issues. Joe Biden, who's supposed to be the great negotiator, the great guy with unions, we had strikes that really interrupted our gateway, our pathway to get our goods and services. Under Donald Trump, there was no such shortage. So those are kind of those everyday examples that voters were taking with them to the polls yesterday.
Finally and briefly, if I may, although it's a rather big issue, of course, immigration, top of the list for many people here in terms of how they voted. Again, Donald Trump has said that he would start mass deportations of illegal immigrants as soon as he gets into office. Is that something that will actually happen?
I think it's important to see how you saw the swing in minority voting blocks towards Donald Trump last night. And one thing we've seen in polling for years, not just in this election cycle, is that you'd be hard-pressed to find people who are more in favor of legal immigration than those who have immigrated here legally. There is a lot of hope that Donald Trump will be able to wrap his arms around this very real problem. I mean, people are very concerned about their neighborhoods that were once taken for granted to be safe places, that you're now seeing crime from illegal immigrants.
But just very briefly, Cassie, there are maybe 12 million, 30 million, we don't really know, illegal migrants in this country. Deporting all of them, or even half of them or a third of them, is going to be impossible and incredibly disruptive.
You're right. It's a huge issue that they're going to have to figure out how to tackle, and hopefully with a helpful Congress, they'll be able to put something together that can make it somewhat tenable. But here's the bottom line of I think what will happen is the countries to the south of us, those heading north to the United States, they heard yesterday's message loud and clear that our border is now closed.
Cassie Smedley, thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Matt.
So, how will Trump govern this time round, and who will he call to run his second administration? He famously described his last cabinet as his biggest mistake. So this time, he's likely to surround himself with staunch loyalists, and that could include some of the big-time supporters of his campaign. Assembling his team for his second stay in the Oval Office, Trump has a huge challenge. Many of those who worked for him in his first term frustrated his more radical plans. That won't happen again. Top of the list will be the big names from the campaign.
Yeah, who did you say? Oh, let me tell you, we have a new star. A star is born, Elon.
And there are none bigger than Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, owner of SpaceX, Tesla, and Twitter, now X. He joined Trump at Mar-a-Lago last night and has relentlessly campaigned for the president-elect, personally offering $1 million to registered voters who backed a free speech petition. He's promised to lead a Department of Government Efficiency to cut trillions of dollars in spending. Then there's Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the anti-vaccine activist and wayward son of the Kennedy dynasty. He dropped his third-party run for president in exchange for a Trump role to, quote, make America healthy again. Of the few who may return from the first time round is former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, tipped for another major foreign policy role. He's called on the US to help Israel, quote, finish the job against Iran rather than seek a ceasefire in the Middle East.
Say a couple of words.
And of course, the now Vice President-elect J.D. Vance, the former Trump critic now heir to the throne of MAGA and a vessel for right-wing rage. He's called Democrats childless cat ladies and attacked abortion rights.
It turned out to be a good choice.
But it's the behind-the-scenes characters that may well have the biggest impact.
Come here, Susan.
On stage this morning, Trump thanked his campaign chief, Susie Wild, mastermind of his unprecedented return.
The Ice Maiden. We call her the Ice Maiden.
Two more returnees could be Stephen Miller, advocate for the strictest of immigration policies.
Donald Trump will send them back.
And Robert Lighthizer, who pushed for harsh trade tariffs that may yet cause global panic. Whatever decision he makes, Trump now has 2 months to put his team together. 2 months until we see what an unrestrained MAGA administration will bring. Well, among those who has worked very closely with the new president-elect but has since fallen out with him is Mick Mulvaney. He served as acting chief of staff in Trump's first White House for 15 long months, but resigned from the administration on the night of January the 6th, 2021. When I spoke to him earlier, I began by asking if he was surprised that the events of that day, January the 6th, hadn't led to Trump being rejected by the electorate.
It's going to be judged now by going forward, not by going backwards. This is an argument you have during the campaign, and what a majority of Americans, and he won the popular vote, which is stunning to me, said, you know what? Regardless of how we feel about it, we don't care. We want this guy to be the president for the next 4 years, so we'll see what happens.
What's he going to do this time that we're going to like or not like?
Well, the tariffs are real. He likes tariffs, and he will use those as leverage to get what he wants in negotiations.
Higher tariffs, I mean, he's talked about 20%, possibly higher for goods from China. That's just going to drive up inflation and at worst, cause a trade war, isn't it?
At worst, that's true. At best, it might create opportunity for British businesses to sell into the U.S. I actually think there's a better chance now for a U.S.-UK free trade agreement than there was under Biden. Trump doesn't dislike trade deals. He dislikes multilateral trade deals.
When British prime ministers get too close to American presidents, it becomes a fatal attraction. Are we going to have a rerun of that movie with Keir Starmer and Donald Trump?
You know, listen, the easy answer is to say that Trump and Starmer won't get along because their politics are different. That is to misread Donald Trump. I think he's got a good chance to be close with Keir Starmer if they get a chance to hit it off. What's your foreign secretary's?
David Lammy.
Yeah, he's going to have a problem.
Yeah,
so because he called him Hitler, and that's probably a bad thing to do.
And will Trump remember that?
Trump remembers everything.
Apparently what Trump likes about Keir Starmer is that he's a knight.
I'll give you a real...
Is Trump impressed by titles?
I will give you a real world example, and I don't know if this got a lot of press. I'm not going to give away too much of the inside stuff of what I was doing in the White House. I think that King Charles, then Prince Charles, and Donald Trump got along better than anybody realized. Because they had some things in common that they were able to talk about. And Trump is really good at this.
Like
they were interested in architecture. The king prefers a more traditional style than Trump do, but it was a conversation topic. Also, Trump does great work on the environment, and his golf course up in Aberdeen is very close to a royal piece of property, and they talked about environmental management. That's how Trump works.
Sorry, Mick, but on the environment, I can't imagine two people further apart than King Charles and Donald Trump.
You'd be wrong about that. Donald Trump has won awards worldwide for his golf courses for environmental protection.
Prime Minister Netanyahu. They don't particularly like each other, I gather.
Oh, they go back and forth.
Does Netanyahu get a free pass to do what he likes in Gaza and in Lebanon and in Iran?
Not a free pass, but the relationship between the two gentlemen is salvageable. In fact, I think it's probably on the road to being salvaged already.
If Netanyahu wants to have regime change in Iran, get rid of the Ayatollahs, will Trump support him politically, militarily?
If we do, we won't be the only ones.
First time around when Trump was president, there were lots of designated adults.
Yes,
and now
yes.
there's a worry that loyalty will be more prized than expertise or judgment or wisdom. Are there good people that he will appoint?
That is a good question, and it's a question that I give a great deal of thought to, and I am concerned...
Because you want to be one of them?
Because, no, I'm not going to be one of them, but I am concerned that maybe he tired of having people in the office who would tell him things he didn't want to hear. I'm convinced that's one of the reasons he asked me to move on to something else.
Yeah.
That being said, you've asked another question, which is, will he be surrounded by good people? He will. In fact, I honestly think that having learned what he learned the first term, his second cabinet will be better than his first. The question is, how much will he listen to them?
Dick Mulvaney, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, one person who was not on the stage with Donald Trump last night is his nephew, Fred Trump. He voted for Kamala Harris. He joins me now. Good to see you again, Fred. One would have thought, because your blood, your family, that after such an event, you know, your uncle's been president twice now, that you might be on that stage. Why not?
Well, he and I have had some big-time differences over the past couple of years, namely when he said my son should just die because he has disabilities, but because
did he actually say that?
He said that. And January 6th was just a turning point, not just in my life, of course, but in the country's.
But he wasn't always like that with you, was he? I mean, I think you told me not so long ago that he taught you how to play golf.
Yeah, we used to go to the Douglaston driving range in Douglaston, New York, and we'd go to movies together, and we spent many good times together.
You were fond of him?
He was a good uncle.
He was fond of you?
He was, yes. I reminded him of the good things of my father.
And has that Donald Trump disappeared?
I think it has, unfortunately. He plays the populist, and good for him. People will buy into that, and that's what's made him a success. Unfortunately, I think his followers are believing everything he says, and that could be a danger.
But the Donald Trump that moves into the White House again for the second time, what kind of Donald Trump will that be?
I said often that, is it worth the risk that Donald will put everything or some things behind him and advance the country forward in a positive way? I'm not there yet. As you know, I'm a fierce advocate honoring people with disabilities like my son, William. I think this is now his second chance to try to get on board with that. He said today that or last night, he wants to be a president of all the people. People with disabilities are 60, 70 million people strong. So he knows that I am honoring those people and doing everything I can to advocate on their behalf. I would love for him to join that cause.
And the Donald Trump that was cruel about your son, the Donald Trump that you don't like, that you didn't want to see win this election, where did that Donald Trump come from? Where was he created? How was he created?
Well, I mean, one thing, it's Donald's policies and the Republican Party's policies that I have disagreed with since I was able to vote when I was 18. There's no doubt about that.
But character matters.
Character does matter. And I've said time and time again, I was 6 years old in 1968, Martin Luther King, Bobby Kennedy, pretty damn good role models.
Yeah.
And they were my role models. Were their characters 100%?
Okay, but what about Donald Trump? And was it his father, your grandfather? Was it Roy Cohn, his mentor?
Donald got his drive from my grandfather, absolutely. And Grandpa was a driven guy. Roy Cohn was just a very, well, Donald will say a great influence on him. I think it was a terrible influence on him. But yes, Roy Cohn lives in Donald.
And how would you sum up his temperament, Donald Trump's temperament?
It's disturbing. I don't understand. Maybe it's just because of the way I am, the way I was brought up by my parents. I just don't see it. And as tough as my grandfather was, he never went to this level.
But, I mean, how would you describe that temperament? Is it impetuous? Is it angry?
It's cruel.
Is it rageful?
There's something in him that he doesn't even think about something. He just goes for the hard the hard
But he
consequences.
can also be quite funny, can't he? He makes people laugh. Not everyone would agree with it, but I've seen him, in front of a crowd.
Yeah.
And there is charm there. I've met him, I've interviewed him, and there were embers of charm, I have to say.
There's no doubt about it. But his base also laughs when he mocks a New York Times reporter who has disabilities, or mocks wounded veterans, and his base laughs at that.
And that desire to upset people, because that's the only way some people would explain that, to say the thing that really hurts.
Right.
What is that all about? Is that electoral? Is that, is that tactics? Is it character?
It's just gotten worse over the years, and I really look forward to the point where we can move past that. He is who he is. Let's see if he can recalibrate in some way to move forward in a positive direction. That's what I'm hoping for. And if I can do anything to help that, I certainly will.
Fred Trump, thank you very much indeed for joining us here.
Thank you.
Well, the implications of this victory could be profound around the world. There have been some warm welcomes for Mr. Trump's victory from world leaders, Sir Keir Starmer among them, but there's also a huge amount of uncertainty about what his administration will mean. He's famously promised to end Russia's war in Ukraine within 24 hours, but he didn't say how. And as for the Middle East, well, he's repeatedly urged Israel to finish the job, whatever that means. Our international editor, Lindsay Hilson, has this.
America first. America first is a very important part of America.
America first. No more exaltation of democracy and traditional alliances. The once and future president has other ideas and other friends.
I had a very good relationship with President Xi, and a very good relationship with Putin, and a very good relationship with Kim Jong-un, who has a nuclear force that you won't even believe.
He has spelt out his foreign policy in a series of interviews and rallies. First, no more military aid to Ukraine, because he can sort out that war in no time.
If I'm president, I will have that war settled in one day, 24 hours.
How would you settle that war in one day?
Because I'll meet with Putin, I'll meet with Zelensky. They both have weaknesses and they both have strengths. And within 24 hours, that war will be settled. It'll be over.
On the battlefield, that means Ukraine would be forced to negotiate from a position of weakness as Russia pushes its advantage. Well, that's Europe's problem, says the president-elect. And, he says, he once told a NATO leader that if they didn't contribute more to the alliance, US forces wouldn't defend them if the Russians attacked.
Let's say that happened. No, I would not protect you. In fact, I would encourage them to do whatever the hell they want. You got to pay. You got to pay your bills.
Little hope for the residents of Gaza or Lebanon. Trump has reportedly told the Israeli Prime Minister, do what you have to do to defeat Hamas and Hezbollah, and is likely to favour further belligerence towards Iran. Forest fires in California. Nothing to do with climate change, according to Donald Trump, who says rising sea levels just mean more beachfront property. One of his first acts as president last time was to withdraw from the Paris Climate Accords.
We're going to drill a baby drill. And I will terminate the Green New Scam. And we'll cut your energy prices in half.
President Xi Jinping of China hasn't yet reacted to Trump's victory, but he knows what's been promised, a trade war.
To me, the most beautiful word in the dictionary is tariff, and it's my favorite word.
As before, President Trump will likely elbow aside European allies, privileging instead one-on-one contacts with autocrats. He sets great store by being unpredictable, rejecting traditional diplomacy, doing it his own way. President Xi, he said in a meeting with editors last month, won't dare to blockade Taiwan because he respects me and knows I'm crazy.
Lindsay Hilson. Well, joining me now is Fred Fleitz, who has worked for the CIA and the Department of Defense and worked for the National Security Council during the first Trump administration. He's now at the America First Policy Institute. Fred, it's good to have you on the program. Let's go through a number of key issues. Let's start with NATO. Is he going to pull America out of NATO?
No, I want to start with Fred Trump. I saw your interview with Fred Trump. I thought that was one of the most tawdry and irresponsible pieces of journalism I have ever seen. Donald Trump wins a conclusive mandate to remake American politics, to remake global security, and you pull up some relative I've never heard of, I've never seen on TV, to whine about Trump for 5 minutes. It simply goes how the liberal British elite are out to get Trump. They're not interested in objective journalism. Right. That's why the British people were so surprised at this outcome. They've seen these lies on your channel, in the BBC, in The Economist. So, I mean, I don't even know what the point is talking with you. You're so incredibly biased. I think Trump is going to remake global politics. And what you're not saying,
may I respond to that? Right.
Look, Donald Trump's tenure as president was pretty good for the UK, was pretty good for Europe. I seem to remember the Ukraine war started under Joe Biden. That's something I don't think we're going to hear on your channel.
I was hoping to, let me just say, I was hoping to get to all those points, and I'm glad that you've done that. But he was talking about family, and as far as I know, you're not a member of the Trump family. We were talking about personal stuff. And that was very much his personal view. He wasn't talking about the election. He wasn't talking about the political strategy. He wasn't talking about that. He was talking, okay, whatever. Let's try and be responsible then and talk about the issues at hand. NATO. Will he pull out of NATO or not?
Donald Trump has made very clear in his America First approach to U.S. national security that he wants a strong president, a strong national security policy, a strong military, to work in cooperation with our allies and alliances, but also to make sure that members of these alliances carry their own weight. I'm not going to speak for Trump on how he's going to do this. I will say he's going to be pretty tough with NATO members who are not paying their 2% of GDP as they're required to under their agreements with other NATO members.
Okay. He has said that he would end the war in Ukraine in the first 24 hours of being in office. How do you think he's going to do that?
You know, the issue for the war in Ukraine is that we have a situation where we have American and British and European politicians who are sending weapons to Ukraine for as long as it takes, but there's no strategy to end the war. They're basically doing this for virtue signaling. They think Putin is evil. They want to send weapons there. But this is promoting a war of attrition that is killing all the Ukrainian soldiers. There's going to be a shortage of Ukrainian young men. We're going to start to end the war, and this is my opinion, what Mr. Trump will do, by having a president determined to stop it, to start negotiations. So how he's going to do that, he hasn't told me his plan, but I think the first step to ending the war is to have a world leader who wants to end the war.
Let's move on to Iran. I know that in the first Trump administration, correct me if I'm wrong, that there were divisions within the cabinet about how to deal with Iran. Some people wanted intervention, others didn't. You now have got this war with Iran and Israel. What do you think he'll do about that?
Well, I heard Nick Mulvaney complaining about who might be in the Trump cabinet. I'll tell you, there will be quite a few very qualified national security experts working for Mr. Trump. A problem in the first term is that the president brought some people in who did not support his objectives with Iran on either fixing or pulling out of the 2015 nuclear deal with Iran, the JCPOA. I believe that Mr. Trump will restore maximum pressure. He's going to bankrupt Iran until it stops sponsoring terrorism and meddling in the region. But as in the first administration, he'll be willing to talk to America's adversaries, whether it's Iran or China or Russia.
Right. Actually, as I remember the interview with Mick Mulvaney, I think he said there were some good people around that Trump could call upon to join him in the cabinet, but maybe I misheard that. Would you be one of those people? Are you waiting for a phone call from Mr. Trump?
Look, I'd be honored to work for the president. I worked for him before. He hasn't asked yet. We'll see.
Okay. Wish you all the best. Fred Fides, thank you very much indeed. Well, Mr. Trump's victory made the dollar, Wall Street and the crypto markets yelp with joy, sending Bitcoin to a record high. But what impact is Trump likely to have on global financial stability? Here's our economics correspondent, Helia Ibrahimi.
Matt, you've been talking about what it means for geopolitics. Let me outline the market reaction and concerns about global trade. Let's look at markets first, and across the board on every US market, you can see shares were surging. Traders are all betting that a second Trump presidency will ramp up tax cuts and kick off massive deregulation. While Asian stocks and some European markets retreated off the back of fears of a trade war, the dollar has been on a tear, soaring, having one of its biggest one-day jumps since 2016, up against the pound, up against the euro and the renminbi. It's also worth looking at Tesla. That was up 15% on the US Open, based entirely on the bromance between Elon Musk and Trump rather than any net zero ambitions. Musk saw his personal fortunes today swell by an estimated $14 billion. Not a bad trade. Meanwhile, BMW saw its shares tumble. Car companies are particularly exposed to tariffs, and that leaves German autos and the beleaguered German economy deeply vulnerable. But Matt, the #1 Trump trade has been crypto. Have a look at this slightly mind-boggling chart. You can see over a decade ago, it was worth just a couple of $100. Now it's gone up to last night almost a record high of $75,000. The Bitcoin bros have been cutting their political teeth on this campaign, becoming Trump's most lucrative corporate funders. He's campaigned with them. He's launched his own stablecoin. He's even promised to sack the head of the financial regulator. There will be big questions about how this love-in will shape the Trump presidency. But Matt, even bigger alarm bells are ringing over the prospect of incoming tariffs and how inflationary they'll be. The US currently imports $3.1 trillion worth of goods, and Trump has talked about raising tariffs by 20% worldwide. That would come at a big cost, not just to the US, but also trading partners like the UK. In his first presidency, Trump outlined just $60 billion of trade to China that he hit with tariffs of 25%. But now he says he's going to hit the entire $426 billion of Chinese goods with tariffs of 60%. Now, that would be wildly inflationary. Think about people's mobile phones, electronics, home goods, and of course, Tesla's main rival, Chinese EV car maker BYD. So Matt, buckle up. This could be a bumpy ride.
Welcome back to Washington, D.C., where Donald Trump will soon be taking up residence again. And Downing Street has insisted that the Prime Minister would welcome a visit by Mr. Trump to the UK, after Sir Keir Starmer described him as a steadfast supporter of the special relationship. But not all of his cabinet, not least Foreign Secretary David Lammy, have been quite so complimentary. So just how special will that relationship continue to be? This report from our Politica editor, Gary Gibbon, has flash photography from the very start.
Midtown New York 6 weeks ago. Behind the car at the front of the picture, Keir Starmer's limo slides into the security tent outside Trump Tower. No photos were permitted of the meeting that followed over dinner in Donald Trump's apartment. But Keir Starmer hopes some trust was established here.
Trump likes people coming to pay court to him. And it was smart, I think, to come out very quickly with a statement congratulating Trump on his election victory this morning.
No time to be wasted. The winner congratulated before the loser had conceded. There's much said by many now round this table to be lived down.
We have 250,000 people saying no to Donald Trump.
During President Trump's first term, David Lammy tweeted a lot of invective, including Trump supports neo-Nazis and the Ku Klux Klan. All that comes out of his mouth is utter poo. The new Tory leader used her first Prime Minister's questions to ask if David Lammy had apologised for that at their joint meeting with Donald Trump.
If he did not apologise, will the Prime Minister do so now on his behalf?
We discussed a number of issues of global significance. It was a very constructive exercise.
Will the Prime Minister show that he and his government can be more than student politicians by asking you, Mr. Speaker, to extend an invitation to President Trump to address Parliament on his next visit?
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition is giving a masterclass on student politics.
Keir Starmer's ordered ministers to keep negative thoughts about Donald Trump to themselves. but some of his slipped out only 10 months ago.
These aren't Churchillian Tories anymore. If anything, they behave more and more like Donald Trump. It's all woke, woke, woke. Wedge, wedge, wedge. Divide, divide, divide.
To what extent do those old insults get forgotten? To what extent do they still lurk?
I think he doesn't forget them. He doesn't forget them. So you can't, as it were, wipe the slate completely clean. There'll always be somewhere there in the background, and there'll always be an aide who has a sort of list of them to present at the wrong moment. But Trump he's attracted to power.
And Donald Trump will know Keir Starmer will probably be in power throughout his presidency. But it won't stop him upending policy on Ukraine, on climate change and on tariffs. Rachel Reeves was asked if the damage of tariff wars could mean her budget forecasts need to be rewritten.
I think it is too early to start making changes to forecasts for our economy because of the election of a president in the United States.
The return of Donald Trump to the White House challenges great chunks of Keir Starmer's government missions and could test discipline as the Labour leader tries to make nice, but many in his party refuse to do anything of the sort.